Hey there Wargamers, and welcome back to another Wargames Delivered video. In this video, we are going to be speed painting an Umber Beserker from Song of Ice and Fire, the miniatures game. Let's get started. So to start this video off, I really wanted to showcase what you can do with just mainly the speed paints. I did use a couple other paints here, like the metallics and a couple acrylics as well, just to add some highlights, but I wanted to primarily show off what you can do with just the speed paints here. So we're starting off with dark wood, and with this we're going to catch all of the areas that are sort of recessed clothing areas. So all of the underclothing, his pants in between his boots and his cloak there, and his undershirt as well. We're also going to cover the cloak underneath the fur here with this color, just leaving the fur the base coat color, just because we're going to use a different color on this. Now with the speed paints, you only really need one thin coat to really get the effect that you're going for. You will want to avoid going over the speed paint layers that you've already placed down, especially if they're still drying. Give them enough time to dry before you place another layer down. If you want it a little bit darker, just because it can tend to reactivate sometimes if you don't wait long enough, or if it's still semi-wet. So give it a good amount of time to dry. I usually wait about half an hour or so. Just move on to another section of the mini and then work on that until you've given it enough time to dry. So that's kind of my guidelines for using 2 coats or 3 coats on the speed paint. And as you can see, I'm a little bit messy with the speed paint here, so I'm going to go through with the base coat color that we use, which is just like a mix of a light gray and matte white, and we'll just use that to clean up any areas that we accidentally hit with the dark wood. So when you're speed painting, you kind of want to be careful all around, just to avoid making any mistakes on the base coat that you placed earlier, but it's pretty easy to fix, and you can pretty much cover it up with the speed paint you're going to use on those areas later on. So just keep that in mind while you're speed painting. So to clean up these areas here, we have a bit of a off-white and a matte white to just kind of cover up all of the areas that we kind of made a mistake, or just went a little bit too sloppy with the dark wood here. So you're going to want to do this after every step with your speed paint. If you get speed paint over a different area, different colored speed paint area, you'll just want to take your white here like this, just cover up that area and go over with the correct speed paint once it's dry. Once you've given that enough time to dry, we're going to switch over to our next step, which is going to be hardened leather. And for this, we're just going to cover the lower part of the cloak on the model here. And as with all steps when you're speed painting, just be very careful around the base coated areas, the white and off-white areas that you have. The point of that is to really establish shadows and highlights, so you don't really have to do that later on when you're speed painting. So really avoid those white areas that you want to keep clean for your next speed paint steps. Now across the speed paint line for the army painter, they're pretty consistent in terms of coverage all the way across the line. So once you use one, that's pretty much how they all feel on your brush. So that's pretty handy. It's some speed paint lines are a little bit are not so consistent. So this is a very beginner-friendly paint line to use. Once you finish that part up, we're going to switch over to sand golem for the fur parts of the model, mainly on the back of the cloak. And with each of these steps, if you're not satisfied with the color, you can either thin down the speed paint and get a little bit of a lighter tone with each of them, or you can also add another layer and get them a little bit darker. Just depends on what you're going for in your models. And in a future video, we'll kind of go over creating your own speed paints and mixing them together, and using the speed paint medium to, kind of create a new speed paint for you. But for this, I'm just going to kind of mix two of these colors together to kind of give myself a different wooden color for the handles of the axes here. So I mixed the sand golem and the hardened leather together, and that's what I used here for the handles of the axes. And as you can see in each of these close-up shots, the speed paints are all loaded with 2 mixing balls in each of them. There's a front and back shot there, so you can kind of see the effect of the sand golem on the fur parts. Now we're going to switch over to Fire Giant Orange, and for this we're going to do the tabard and the upper part of the cloak here on the model. In the A Song of Ice and Fire books, the Umber family has a banner that is bright orange and has a screaming giant on it. So I wanted to at least capture the bright orange. Didn't really want to try to capture the screaming giant with speed paint here. So I'm going for a more simplified, quick, get you guys on the battlefield kind of effect here. Usually I'll tend to add a little bit more detail to the champion or the leader of the squad, so in that case I would add the full tabard insignia on the champion, but in this case this guy's just kind of a rank and file berserker, so we'll just kind of give him the basic treatment. As you can see here, we have a nice bit of variety in color on the model now with the Fire Giant Orange. And now we're going to switch over to Crusader Skin, and we're just going to cover the face with this color. I applied this a little bit heavier than I do most speed paints just because I wanted a little bit more depth in the face, but as you'll see later on in the video, I wasn't quite happy with the result in the face, and so we'll fix that up a little bit later on. And as you can see in this shot, the contrast wasn't too high, wasn't exactly what I was going for there, so we're going to switch over to Grim Black and think about it for a minute and see how we can fix that. And for this, we're just going to cover all of the boots, the gloves, and the belt and the straps on the model. As you can tell here, the Grim Black is a little bit more heavily pigmented than the other paints. So you'll want to be very careful around the parts that you've already painted. In retrospect, this may have been a good first step rather than doing this a little bit later on. So just keep that in mind while you're doing this. Usually these kind of speed paints are better saved for the beginning. That's why I kind of did the oak brown, and I just kind of blanked on this one and didn't really think it through. So keep that in mind. And on the belt of the model, you'll want to be very careful around the orange that we put down earlier. Although you'll want to kind of hit the edges as much as you can to sort of blackline just a little bit. And this will just add a little bit of shadows and depth to the areas around the tabard and the belt. And the brush I'm using here is a little bit thick but has a very fine point, so if you're more comfortable with a smaller brush, feel free to switch over to a smaller brush for this step. It could help you out. I prefer a thicker brush with a finer point. I feel like it's a little bit easier to work with, but obviously that's subjective as well. Once you've got that step finished, we're going to switch over to Gravelord Gray, and for this step, we're just going to cover the hair of the model. And again, be very careful around the cloak and the face that we have painted earlier, but it's also sort of a good idea to add some shadows into the recesses of where the hair and the face meet. So keep that in mind. Sort of try to pin wash, I guess you could say, that area. And yeah, just keep it steady and do your best. Once you finish that step up, we're going to switch over to our metallics for a little bit here. And we're going to switch to gunmetal for just a little bit to cover the heads of the axes and the buckle of the belt. And with this step, you don't really need 2 coats of the gunmetal here. You could get away with just 1 coat. We're going to be using some wash and a dry brush highlight afterwards, so just keep that in mind. You could use 2 coats if you'd like to, but you can get away with using 1 as well. And when doing the belt buckle here, just be very careful around the areas that we've already painted, of course. Just be very, very careful around the black and the orange especially. Alright, and once you've let that dry, we'll switch over to our wash step, and for this I figured we'd use something a little bit lighter than dark tones. We'll go with strong tone here. And we'll just cover the heads of the axes and the belt buckle as well with this, and give that enough time to dry. We'll do a light dry brush on the heads of the axes and do a light highlight just with a normal brush on the belt buckle as well. And if you're not careful and your speed paint isn't dry, the wash can tend to just literally wash the speed paint away, so just be very careful of that. Give it plenty of time to dry before you apply this step. Next up, we'll just do a few very light dry brush effects on the model here, starting with Skeleton Bone from the normal Army Painter War Paints acrylic line. We're going to do a very light dry brush, again, using our cardboard here to get the excess paint off and work the paint into the brush here. I always prefer this over paper towels. Shout out to Josh for the suggestion. But paper towels will work fine as well if that's all you've got. We're just going to do a light dry brush over the fur cloak on the back of the model here. Once you have a nice highlight established with the skeleton bone there, we're going to switch over to our next dry brush step, and we're going to switch to plate mail metal. And you'll always want to do metallics dry brushed after your regular acrylics. If you have enough dry brushes to have one for metallics and one for your normal acrylics, that's the best way to go. Just anything to avoid getting those metallic flakes on the parts that you don't want them. And here we're just adding a light highlight to the axes here, just hitting the areas where the light would shine the most on them. And like I said, we'll go again with the brush and hit the belt buckle once with the plate mail as well. Now that we have that finished, I wanted to do a couple experiments to try to add more expression and depth to the face here. So my first idea was to add some flesh wash to the model here, and I don't think I gave the Crusader skin enough time to dry because I started to have some of the paint kind of peeling off, but I did like the shadows that the flesh wash established, so I think next time I'll just start with this step and then use Crusader skin over that. Now, as you can see in this shot here, we do have some nice shadows and depth from using the flesh wash, but it kind of washed away most of the highlights on the face. So we're going to switch over to Corpse Pale, and we're going to use this to bring some of those highlights back, and we'll go back over with the Crusader skin, and hopefully that'll bring us to the effect that we're looking for. So we're just going to pick out the forehead, the nose, cheekbones, all of the raised areas on the face here where you think the light would hit the most. And I only really used about 2 coats. It was pretty opaque on the model, just slightly translucent, so some of the detail is still a little bit poking through. So that's kind of what I was going for. I wanted a little bit of inconsistency on the highlights on the face to hopefully, when we apply the speed paint, add a little bit more interest to him. Now that the Corpse Pale is dry, we'll switch back over to Crusader Skin. We'll do the same thing we did before with this step and just cover the face, making sure to hit those shadows really hard and kind of wipe away any excess speed paint you have on the highlights of the face. So as you can see, the face turned out a little bit better after doing those steps. So we're going to switch over to Gravelord Gray and clean up the model's beard here and fix any of the mistakes that we made while painting the face and add a little bit more shadows and interest to the parts where the beard kind of meet the face. Now I think we're getting somewhere with the face here. The shadows look a little bit better, although I'm not exactly happy with the highlights. So I think for a final step, we're going to switch over to Stone Golem. And with this, we're just going to pick out the raised areas of the hair and the beard here. So be very careful. Try not to splotch too much paint on the model, and just try to follow the most raised areas and lines of the hair. And when you're highlighting like this over a speed paint, it's very important to make sure you have all of the excess paint wiped off your brush. So just get your paper towel, or if you're like me, get your thumb handy and just wipe off all that excess paint, and you shouldn't have any problems with the paint pooling or too much paint running everywhere. And with this step finished, we will go over to basing our miniature and showing off our finishing shots. And once this step is finished, be sure to move on to basing your miniature in the same fashion that you've based the rest of your army. And as always, guys, be sure to check the link in the description for the giveaway attached to this video. And thanks for watching. Happy wargaming!